You are here, reading this, breathing, thinking. Somewhere in the back of your mind, there is a quiet assumption that has never been challenged that you were always going to be here. That humans were the inevitable outcome of evolution. That something about us was always going to win. It wasn't. The species that exist today are not the species that were supposed to exist. There is no supposed to. Evolution doesn't have a destination. It has pressure and time, and whatever survives the pressure long enough to reproduce. For 165 million years, the animals that survived that pressure were dinosaurs. Then, in a single afternoon 66 million years ago, the pressure changed completely, and suddenly so did the outcome. But here is the part we rarely sit with. The pressure didn't have to change. The asteroid was not inevitable. It was a rock on a specific trajectory that happened to intersect with Earth on a specific day. A slightly different angle, a slightly different timing. And the dinosaurs are still here, and we are not. Not because we lost a fight. Not because we weren't smart enough. But because in a world where apex predators weigh 9 tons and the landscape is already occupied by animals that have been refining their survival systems for 165 million years, there may simply have been no room for something as fragile, as slow, and as ecologically insignificant as early Homo sapiens to get a foothold. The question isn't whether dinosaurs would have hunted us deliberately. The question is whether we would have survived the world they had already built. The obvious framing is predator versus prey. T-Rex sees human, human dies. That version is dramatic and almost certainly misses the point entirely. Most species don't go extinct because something hunts them to zero. They go extinct because the ecological conditions that allowed them to exist stop existing. The food disappears, the habitat fragments. The competition for resources becomes impossible to win. Direct predation is usually the final chapter of a story that started much earlier and much more quietly. The better question is not whether a dinosaur would have eaten us. The better question is, what does the world look like when dinosaurs never go extinct? And is there a version of that world where something like us ever gets the chance to appear, grow, spread, and survive? Because once you start pulling that thread, the answer becomes genuinely uncomfortable. Start with what we know about how humans actually emerged. Our earliest ancestors, the first primates, appear in the fossil record roughly 65 million years ago. The timing is not a coincidence. The extinction of the non-avian dinosaurs created what evolutionary biologists call an ecological release, an enormous amount of biological space that had been occupied by large animals for 165 million years was suddenly empty. Mammals, which had existed for over 100 million years as small, nocturnal, mostly insectivorous animals living in the margins, exploded into that space. Within 10 million years of the extinction event, every major mammalian lineage had appeared. Within 20 million years, the ancestors of primates were in the trees. This is not a minor detail. It is the central fact of our existence. In 2017, a study published in Current Biology by paleontologist Chris Venditti and his team at the University of Reading analyzed the rate of mammalian diversification across the Cretaceous-Paleogene boundary the moment the dinosaurs went extinct. Their finding was unambiguous. Mammalian body size increased dramatically and rapidly immediately after the extinction event. Diversification rates spiked to levels not seen before or since, and the ecological niches that dinosaurs had occupied were filled by mammals within a geologically short period. The implication is stark. Mammals didn't evolve despite dinosaurs. They evolved because dinosaurs were gone. The ecological pressure that had kept mammals small, nocturnal, and marginal for 100 million years was the dinosaurs themselves, not by hunting mammals deliberately, simply by existing, by occupying the space, consuming the resources, and structuring the food web in ways that left no room for mammals to grow into. Remove the asteroid, keep the dinosaurs, and the ecological release never happens. The mammals stay small, the primates never appear. And the long, contingent chain of events that eventually produces a species capable of asking this question never begins. Start with size. Early humans were not impressive animals. Homo sapiens emerged roughly 300,000 years ago, weighed between 50 and 80 kilograms, had no claws, no armor, no venom, and ran at speeds that most large predators could exceed without effort. What we had was cognitive capacity, social coordination, and tool use. Those advantages are real. They are also slow to develop, requiring stable social groups, safe sleeping environments, consistent access to food, and enough generational continuity for knowledge to accumulate and be passed down. In a world with non-avian dinosaurs, every single one of those conditions becomes harder to maintain. Now think about sleep. Modern humans require 7 to 9 hours of unconscious vulnerability every night. Every large mammal that has survived alongside apex predators has evolved strategies to manage that vulnerability. Sleeping in trees, in caves, in herds with rotating vigilance, early humans did the same. But the predators they were managing against lions, leopards, hyenas are animals that top out at around 200 kilograms. Against a predator that weighs 9,000 kilograms and can detect prey through vibration, smell, and vision with acuity 13 times sharper than a human's, the calculus changes entirely. The caves get found. The trees don't hold. The rotating watch can't stay awake long enough against something that doesn't need to sleep the same way we do. But here's what's really interesting. The threat wouldn't have been only the large theropods. Consider the mid-sized predators, the Deinonychus-level animals, pack hunters operating in coordinated groups, fast enough to run down a human, intelligent enough to adapt their behavior. Modern wolves, which are considerably smaller and less cognitively sophisticated than what we understand about pack-hunting theropods, are capable of eliminating ungulate populations across entire regions when humans don't actively manage the ecosystem. A sustained presence of pack-hunting theropods in the same environment as early human populations would not have required a single dramatic kill. It would have required consistent pressure, consistent competition, and consistent disruption of the social structures that make human cognitive advantages usable. Think also about the food web itself. Early humans were not apex predators. We were omnivores competing for the same large herbivore prey that would have been, in a world with dinosaurs, already heavily competed for by animals far more physically capable of taking it down. The megafauna that sustained human hunter-gatherer populations across Africa, Asia, and eventually the Americas, the mammoths, the giant ground sloths, the aurochs, would never have existed. Their ecological niches would have been occupied by sauropods and ceratopsians that had been holding those niches for 100 million years before a single primate ever climbed a tree. The food that built us would not have been there. And then there is disease. Every large, dense animal population produces disease vectors. The closer the ecological contact between large animals and human populations, the greater the probability of zoonotic transmission. We know from our own history that contact with domesticated animals introduced diseases that killed enormous percentages of human populations. Smallpox, influenza, measles, all have animal origins. In a world of dense dinosaur populations occupying every continent, the disease pressure alone would have been a sustained existential challenge for populations already under physical, competitive, and nutritional stress. None of this requires a single dinosaur to decide to hunt humans. It requires only what dinosaurs were already doing for 165 million years: existing, eating, moving, reproducing, and structuring the world around their needs rather than ours. But here's the thing. We keep framing this as a competition we might have lost, as if humans were a team that entered the game late and might not have made the cut. That framing is still too generous to us. The more honest version is that we would never have been in the game at all, not because dinosaurs would have hunted us, because the conditions that created us, the ecological space, the food web, the evolutionary pressure that pushed mammals toward larger bodies and bigger brains, those conditions were the direct product of the dinosaurs being gone. We are not the species that would have survived a world with dinosaurs. We are the species that could only exist in a world after them. The asteroid didn't save the mammals from the dinosaurs. It didn't even save the early primates. It saved nothing deliberately because it was a rock. But its effect was to open a door that had been sealed for 165 million years. And everything we are walked through that door. We are, in the most literal biological sense, children of the extinction, not survivors of it, products of it. There is a version of Earth where the asteroid misses, the dinosaurs continue, the mammals stay small and nocturnal and invisible, moving through the margins of a world that has no interest in them and no room for what they might become. In that version, no one ever asks this question. Not because the question is impossible, but because the kind of mind capable of asking it never appears. We exist in the narrow window between an extinction and whatever comes next. We are here because something ended, because a door opened that had been shut for longer than we can meaningfully imagine. Because in the space left behind by 165 million years of dinosaurs, there was just enough room for something small and strange and improbable to become, eventually, us. They didn't drive us to extinction. They never got the chance. We could only exist in a world they were no longer part of. That is not a victory. It is a coincidence. The most important coincidence in the history of life on this planet.